Welcome to the Queer Comedy Podcast with David Ian and Kate Dale, where funny peculiar meets funny haha.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Queer Comedy Podcast. I'm Kate Dale.
And I'm David Ian.
And we've brought to you again a lovely selection of fabulous queer comedians to talk about what it's like gigging as queer people.
All of whom have performed with the Queer Comedy Club this month. So let's go along the line and get everybody to introduce themselves.
I'm Lily Webb. I'm a 21-year-old stand-up comedian with cerebral palsy, who is non-binary and a lesbian.
Amazing. And today we're going to ask what your intro song would be. If you could pick a song to intro as you walked on, what would it be?
I don't really associate with gender, but Woman by Doja Cat, because it makes me feel like I want to have like a strut, you know?
Oh, I love that.
Oh.
Okay.
Great choice.
Shemai Paub, I'm Jack. I am a stand-up comedian based in Bristol and Cardiff. I mostly do a lot of like really silly political humour, bit of a basic B, not going to lie.
And what's your intro song?
Well, keeping in with theme, my intro song would be a little bit of Alexis by Schitt's Creek, because I really just want to lean into that vibe of just, let's be silly.
I mean, not by Schitt's Creek, Annie Murphy. Give her the real credit.
Yeah. That's a bop as well.
By Alexis.
Yeah.
It's an absolute tune.
I don't have the hair for it, but...
I do. And on that, my intro music would be Atomic by Blondie, because I just love the idea of singing along to Your Hair is Beautiful. Do you think we have to pay? Is that close enough that we'll have to pay royalties?
Probably. And also, I now have an image of you just doing that every morning when you get up.
Oh, I do.
I think we have to be in tune to pay the royalties.
Oh.
Who said that bad? I can't believe you said that.
Not even introduced herself. Wow. All right. Who are you?
I'm just going to spit. Okay, sorry. I'm Mary. I'm very wholesome. I do a lot of. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I do lots of sort of geeky science jokes, because that's my day job.
And apparently, evil reads. And what would your intro song be?
The Pokemon theme tune. Very humble. It starts with just very, very sort of tension rising, and says, "I'm going to be the very best," which I do. That's me. I've actually done that. I've actually walked on a gig and you got to choose your own start on intro, and I did that. It was amazing.
Oh, look.
Yeah, it was a solid choice. I'm gonna say.
Iconic.
Yeah.
My name is Jeremy Top. I'm a bald old man, and
Who's not a top?
it's ironic.
Well, I don't think so much.
Yeah, makes so much sense. My intro theme would be also from a cartoon. Would be Gem and the Holograms, the '80s TV show, because I aspire to be truly outrageous. Do you actually know what I'm talking about anymore?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Too young.
No. Okay, fine. She had pink hair and she could change. She's
What's it
like
called?
Gem and the Holograms. Wait,
There's your
am I the
time
oldest person here? Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm
Okay.
even older. It must have been between.
Oh my god. Anyway, just Google the shit out of Gem and the Holograms. The opening theme tune is probably the best theme tune from the 80s you'll ever hear in your life. It's
20 years
incredible.
before I was born.
I love the fact that they just looked at me when they were like 20 years before I was born, as if I,
I just
would
like to
understand.
make other people feel bad about their age.
As you should.
No,
Lily,
it's
we
fun.
feel bad enough without your help.
Yeah, because everything hurts. Okay, what's your song?
So I'm kind of tempted to change to a cartoon now, and I was thinking Top Cat because Top Kate, and you'll all be too young to remember that. But actually,
No, we're not all too young to remember that.
It would just be ridiculous, which I
So it would be
largely
highly
am.
appropriate.
But I'll stick with my original, which was "It's a Woman's World" by Cher.
Beautiful.
Which is an epic song. And a
Nice.
really cool video. Low
Yeah.
budget, but really cool.
That's like me. Without being really
Oh,
cool.
you really- She actually, from the same album, she has an even lower budget video that was made specifically for gay clubs for her song "Take It Like a Man," which was just a load of men in pants washing cars, and they only play. It was literally made to be played in gay clubs, and she made them sign to set like that's the only place it would go.
She's a smart
She knows her
businesswoman,
audience.
isn't she?
Yeah.
Legend.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm a Taurus. And I think my song would be maybe just like pre-recorded rapturous applause.
Excellent.
Cut to us actually applauding that.
Yeah. That'll be really fun for the levels as well. So.
Wow, amazing. Is that because you do musical comedy and you don't want music on before you?
Exactly. I don't want to compete.
That's
Or is it just that you're a thirsty bitch who needs applause and isn't convinced it's going to get it?
It's mostly that, yeah.
Are you suggesting that comedians seek validation there, Kate? I don't think that's right.
It's a theory.
This is purely a giving situation. It's all about what we give to everyone else. Very much a one-way relationship, just out there giving the love. Okay, so today, what are we going to talk about?
Well, we thought today maybe this thing to talk about. All comedians, I think, will occasionally encounter difficult gigs, things that don't go quite well, crowds that maybe they don't quite connect with. So thought we could maybe share a few war stories about that. But also, I think thinking about it as queer comedians, whether there's particular, I mean, it's hard for us to know because we've only ever been queer comedians, but whether that brings a certain level to it of how difficult it is to deal with that. And also, because I need it, to be honest, tips on how to deal with it as well. So I'd love to know how people have successfully managed to tackle that or deal with it.
All right, let's go to Ben first.
Yay. I don't know. I don't know if I have like a way of dealing with it. I always get very nervous before a gig. Like however many I've done, I will still get nervous before the beginning. And
I find you fascinating before you go on because you do get nervous, don't you?
I get really nervous.
And you are one of the most consistent performers I've ever seen.
Correct.
And every time before you go on, you are just like,
yeah, I really,
Yeah.
it drains a lot of my energy actually. Don't know why I do it. Yeah, and you look out at the audience, and particularly if there's a lot of men, and you can tell if they're gay or not. And if there's a lot of straight men, I think, wow, this could be horrible because it just makes you think of school.
yeah.
So yeah, sorry. But also a funny thing maybe at the end to make it light, which I don't have, but there we are.
Because you're doing musical comedy, and so there's a bit in your set where you have to launch into it.
Yeah.
Do you think that adds an added pressure because you're not necessarily giving them what they're expecting?
I actually find that a lot easier than talking because it's kind of like, well, I'm going to do this and I have my words that I'm going to say and you can enjoy it or not. Whereas with more traditional stand-up, you don't have that shield. So I actually, the other way, I think.
Yeah.
I find it quite impressive the way you do it because it's just because I sort of like going by the audience. If I get a bad reaction, I'm like, okay, don't say that joke. It's sort of like real time in your head. It's like go that way or go that way and try trial and error. So I think the fact that you have to go through a song, be like, I have to do this minute and a half, and I can't really change tactics halfway through. I find that really impressive.
Unless the track stops, which has happened.
I mean, that's a different scenario. But when we've spoken about this a little bit. When you're at a gig, so we were recently at a gig, a queer comedy club gig actually, where the audience was very rowdy, and my concern was that they weren't going to pay attention. And for my stuff, I feel like it's more storytelling, so you kind of need to pay attention in order for it to actually be funny. Yeah, because it sort of all loops back on itself. But then you said, like with the music, you felt like they paid attention with the music, but the rest of it they didn't. Yeah. So you feel like that's the shield that you're talking about.
Yeah, there's that, and there's also the like, well, I know my song. I'm going to do my song, and you will either enjoy it or you won't, but I know what I'm going to do. Whereas the more stand-up stuff is a bit like, should I, like kind of what you were saying, should I say this joke? Should I be doing crowd work? Whereas the music kind of just gives you well, for the next 3 minutes, this is what I'm doing.
See, that's really interesting to me because my stand-up is if I've decided what set I'm doing, that's the set I do. I don't live edit mine.
Okay, interesting.
If I'm doing it, because I know, I think what I do is funny. And I very much try and have the same opinion. If you don't think it's funny, it's on you. I'm not changing it for you. This is a set that I have crafted that works in a particular order, in a particular way. And if I live edit it, then any bits that link back later on
You say
Yeah.
that, but I've seen you sat on a man's lap.
That's true.
That is crowd work.
As part of a gig, to get clear.
Yeah, to be clear, yes, there was one particular gig. There was one particular gig where the entire set went out the window, but did you not see how I couldn't get back into my set because I'd completely abandoned my set and I was now essentially just sat on this guy's lap, and that became the act.
You were enjoying it a lot more than you were.
It's controversial. That's not true. He was enjoying it.
Yeah.
That was another difficult room for different reasons, but generally my set is.
Yeah.
If what I've decided, it doesn't say the same every time, but it has a journey that it moves through, and I don't live edit it. So, but I treat it very much like a song because I do think there's a rhythm to how I say it as well.
Yeah.
So it strings together. So yeah, it's interesting. That's different ways of like handling it. But I end up in the same situation though, where I'm like, well, I don't have anything else to say. This is what I've prepared. So this is what you get.
Yeah.
Even if it's inappropriate. What I might do, I had a gig the other night where it was a room full of like women in their late 60s. And I was just like, I'm going to tell you stories about my life, and it looks like we have quite different lives. So just look at it as an educational experience. And I'm sorry for the language.
Did you say that up front?
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay, that's smart.
And how did they respond?
Tepidly. I would say there was a couple of like people in their 30s in the room who loved it, but there were these women in their late 60s who were quite upper middle class, I would say. It was a wine bar. They were sat right in the front, and I found it very difficult to not focus on winning them over when there was other people in the room who were enjoying it. And I don't actually know, and I've thought about this quite a lot in the couple of days since, did I make it worse by acknowledging right up front? Like, did I tell them it's not going to work for them? I don't know. But I made myself feel better by being like, I put this disclaimer out there and here's my set.
Yeah, I think it's good because I've done it the other way around, where like I was sort of on the outskirts of London, and it was a middle class crowd as well, and I was trying new stuff, and it was all about like my first date ever with a woman and like how it went terribly, and it just didn't land at all. Like the demographic were just very much like, why do you even have to mention that you're gay? Like that kind of like mindset, and like there was this whole 5 minutes of like, this isn't working, this is really embarrassing. I almost wish that I'd kind of come forward being like, well, you're not my crowd, but strap in. So
I sometimes find that like, especially with my stuff, because sometimes before I've even got on stage, people have already like seen me and already have like a preconceived idea of
Like
what
a formed
I am.
an opinion.
And like what I'm going to talk about. Or they have a brief idea of something like gay is going on, right? They're like, oh
There's
god,
a sprinkle of queer.
and they're like waiting for me to come up, and they're like, and like I've done a few gigs where like I've spoke about like fingering and things like that, and there's just like old men that look like they want to die, and it's like, my kind of thing is like, I think like the main reason why I enjoy stand up so much is talking about like who I am and what I am, and like cerebral palsy, being a lesbian, being non-binary, whatever. That's my thing, and that's why I'm doing stand-up, and like that's what I want to talk about. If you don't like it, this is a you problem.
That's the whole point of doing it, isn't it? It's about telling your story.
Yeah.
And
like,
if you want to see other stories, go and see other stories.
Yeah, if I bomb, like, oh well, you obviously not got very good taste in humour. Like,
it's entirely on you.
Yeah,
I think I can't remember if I said this in one of the previous episodes or not, but I saw a thing where a guy was like, I try and tackle it with the idea that I'm not going into the room to try and make the audience laugh. I'm giving them the opportunity to laugh, and they can take it or leave it.
Oh, interesting.
And I do try and like think of that in that, that second just before you step on. I really try and cling on to that because I'm like, it's your opportunity. You can or you cannot.
And if you don't laugh, you're homophobic.
That's very nice. Like,
there's always. I mean, What about you?
There's a weird thing. So the Welsh circuit is quite interesting. And obviously as comedians, we have to be like adaptable. You have to kind of like listen to the crowd. You have to be able to play to what people want. So like a large portion of the gigs that I do in Wales are like Valleys rugby clubs. Like it's like Valleys rugby clubs, stag do's, that kind of thing. And, for, basic B vibes, I normally wear like a crop top, really go in on it. And there's a weird thing where you adapt to the crowd. Like I will do a lot of like chaotic crowd work. For example, I talk a lot about having been a queer sex worker and the politics around that. So I might ask the room who's the top shagger. And I might like let all the Valleys rugby lads kind of argue through it. And then I might be like, it's me. Like tailor it to the room. But does anyone ever feel like there is also an element where even though you have to adapt to the room, you also kind of have to like sort of, it feels like you're also changing yourself to fit the crowd. You're almost altering your persona.
So with that, so I do a lot of emceeing. So for me, I feel this pressure where I've got to really quickly get the room on board for so the rest, almost like so if I fuck this up, I'm not going to allow the rest of the acts to have or feel safe on stage so they can be their best selves as well. So, you know, going in, if it's predominantly, you know, straight audience as well, I very want to, I think the gig the other night when it was majority straight people, you know, pissed or whatever, they're also thinking, okay, this is going to be a gay comedy night. So they want to feel a bit relaxed as well. So we've got to find that perfect balance of like, we are not threatening. We're not going to say anything that's going to make you feel uncomfortable. Don't worry.
You will say things that make us feel uncomfortable.
We are sweating our tits off, nervous. So it's almost like finding that like middle ground to be like, right, okay, let's set the tone and like, make sure we all have a safe, fun time tonight because they've come out for a comedy night.
Yeah, they want to enjoy it.
And it's, you know, we advertise as a queer comedy night, so we're going to make sure that we can do the best and make sure everyone feels good about what they're about to do as well. It's just a shame that it was a room of two halves. I think that last gig where it was noisy.
But whenever I do, although I will say, just because as much as I speak about the Valleys rugby clubs, I do want to give kudos to Wales where it is. I will enter these gigs in the Valleys and there will be like old men with Carling, like using its perfume in the back, like just not like, and they're stern. But every Valleys gig I do, it's literally the movie Pride. I walk in there, it is an empty room and it looks stern. I tell a couple rugby jokes and then at the end of it, the guy's like, you know what, mate? You're good. I've got you. It's like, really nice.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, like, instead of like avoiding, like, oh, maybe I should avoid the gay topic, it's sometimes like, no, I'm going to say it, and you almost want to give people permission to laugh. Be like, this is why it's funny and it's okay. So
I just really want to know what other people's thought, because you mentioned sometimes do you feel like you're changing who you are to fit the room. Now, Kate and I discuss this really often, and my line is always that I'd rather bomb or fail in the competition or something like that, but be authentically me. I'd rather turn up, represent who I am, deliver what I'm about, and fail than try and change who I am. Because in my everyday life, previously I used to change who I was all the time to fit in and adapt, and I'm actively not doing that anymore. So I don't really want to do that on stage, and that does come at the cost, I think, of, you know, sometimes maybe not going down the way that you want to in a room. But like, how does everybody else feel about that? Because it's really important to me. It really matters.
I think, with that as well, I can just present a little bit over masculine sometimes in that way. So I feel like I can be like, right, okay, I'm gonna. Typical thing I got told last night by a straight woman was, "Oh, you're really gay. What a waste."
Oh, God.
I was like, I haven't heard that gem for a while. But so
nobody thought.
Well, precise. But I don't like butch myself up or anything like that as well. But I can fit in the middle.
What you're saying is you've got a choice. I
can lean either way.
Pass.
I could lean pass, but I can
from a distance.
From a distance. for a group of people who don't mix with gays. Yeah. Actually, sometimes I can lean a little bit and they're a bit like, I didn't clock it at first. Whereas of course everyone else is like, what a fag. No.
I feel like I camp it up on stage. I feel like I lean into the queer element of it. And like, okay, this is not me trying to claim that I'm mask for like any gay dudes listening to like try and seem more attractive. But
he'll
like,
fuck anyone.
I feel like anything goes.
Yeah, you don't have to be masked.
You can find my escort profile on Craigslist. Look me up. No, but like, I feel like I lean into it because there's this weird thing where there is relatability in comedy, but also sometimes people really enjoy something that's actually completely unknown to what they're used to. And like almost, I feel like there's some, particularly in the Valleys, I don't know about the London experience for you guys, but people almost kind of enjoy listening to something that's so different to what they're used to.
But the point is to give people a vision into your life. Like, and it's more interesting if they don't necessarily know that.
I think when I first started doing comedy and people would sometimes react in like a hesitant way, I almost felt bad because I was like, I've put this on.
Made them feel difficult.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, maybe I should like, I don't know, cut that bit out or whatever next time. And then like, I think as I've like developed as a comedian, I've kind of been like, no. And because I've maybe not taken out things or cut things out. I've had situations where I've had people come up to me like, why do you have to talk about being gay and disabled? Like, you're just trying. I had some guy be like, you're just trying to get pity and trying to get pity of people so they laugh.
Can you hear anything more
And
privileged?
I was like, fuck you. I never basically said that I wanted pity off you. Like, I'm just telling you my situation. And then also, I've had situations where people react in like sympathy towards me. So like, I'll be like, oh yeah, I've got cerebral palsy. And then I had like a gig in Edinburgh where I won't say her name, but she's an MSP, a member of Scottish Parliament, and she awed throughout my entire set.
I'm not
She
now
went, she went, I literally was like, oh, and like, I've got cerebral palsy. And as soon as I said that, she went, ah. And then I laughed and I was like, oh, you know, I said something like, oh, this isn't children in need, like, chill out. And she was like, oh, it's just so heartbreaking. And I was like, dude, I'm literally talking about fingering someone. How is this? What the fuck?
Also, if you're on stage, you've gone through it, like you've had that experience and you're processing it, and now you're delivering it.
But
Like,
it's like, if I don't want to talk about, like, say one day I woke up and I was like, oh, I don't really feel like talking about having cerebral palsy today, I would just cut it out. So like, that's why I'm like obviously comfortable with it. But she came up to me afterwards and was like, you're really brave. And I was like,
It's so crazy to think that if you're not exactly how she is, then everything is just like, oh, that you're broken if you're not like me, and you know, that's so. We had a lot of that last night. I think we did a gig, and there was a lot of people amused by some of the jokes that were being told. But in a way that would kind of like head tilt as well. Yeah. And it's difficult to think that they don't know how to react sometimes.
Yeah.
That the only thing they can do is give their like, I'm sorry for your loss kind of like thing. Like, okay.
I'm sorry your able-bodied died. Like,
Oh, just in terms of like modifying, so like especially sort of like live editing stuff, I will sort of like go through my head like, okay, that's not working and that's not working. And sometimes when I pick up like, this isn't a room for a ton of queer jokes, I'll take it out. I still make a point. If I then mention like a specific thing about dating, I then don't be like, when I was dating, man. Like I will still mention like the gender of the person I'm dating, like because I'm queer. I just might not, joke about like my coming out story or whatever. Yeah. But I still feel it's important to like, be authentic and tell the truth. But just maybe live adapt it to the audience.
I think, does everyone have, there's in my set, there's a couple of jokes that I know how, if they don't land in a certain way early on, I know there's jokes later on that are going to be really difficult as well. Because I start song and I start talking about fingering and licking, and if that gets then I know, and then I just normally just plow on, because I'd love to say it's because I am delivering my authentic self and my story, and this is what I want to present, and I've absolutely used stand-up to help make sense of me and how I am in this world. But it's also because I don't know if I've got anything else to say. So I'm just plowing on, and there is that bit of like, well, I'm just going to keep going down the motorway, and it's like being lost, and I've done this when driving, when I'm lost, and I don't know where I am. I'm just going to keep driving, and one day I'll run out of petrol and it'll all be okay.
And that's how you ended up here. We don't know who she is.
But I was going to ask, and this is probably the same I'm sure it is the same for straight comedians as well, is I find myself in rooms somehow, and I'm going to sound like such a school teacher, where audiences don't know how to behave. Yeah. And they think that they're part of the act and they're not.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult, and I don't quite know how to deal with that, because I don't want to tell them to shut the act. I really did the other night want to tell them to shut up, but I don't.
I did last night.
Yeah.
Literally turned to them and turned them to shut up.
And it was hilarious and great and needed saying, because they'd gone beyond.
But I lost my set after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they were so scared that you would bum them.
That's it.
Not all of them. Not
which is a position that many a man has.
I think that growing out sort of a comedy wings as well, in that situation where that fine line between you need to it's not your job to control the audience. Sometimes I going back to me, thanks. I feel it is when I'm hosting, because Scream. I've done it before when I've basically told Scream to an audience to shut up, and I've lost all the respect of the room in that minute, and I think, oh my god, and like I can see my friends who've joined the show looking at me like, Jeremy doesn't shout. What on earth has just happened? And I
Because they
think
can see you're panicking.
it's exact. The vein in my head is now the size of an aubergine, and I cannot tell you. So it's that learning that bit where I'm going to play you at your own game here. I'm gonna circle you out as that naughty schoolboy thing and be like, no, hang on a minute, can I ask you? And then you just, get to know their name. If you can make friends with the worst person in the room, that's what I find.
Yeah.
And bring it back. That's my little technique that I use.
See, it was difficult yesterday because when I turned and said that the room is in two halves, when I turned and said that the half that was paying attention, like they loved it.
Yeah.
The half that wasn't paying attention was still blissfully unaware. There wasn't anybody to pick out. They were just talking to standing up and talking to each other. And so this side of the audience that was really into it, they appreciated what I'd done, and I think I won a bit of respect for them. But I think I had just lost like me. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not what my set is about.
Yeah.
And now I've got to pivot, and because it didn't work, because they didn't shut up. And a big problem at that point was I was struggling to hear my own thoughts.
Yeah.
Like they were so
Incredibly
loud.
noisy.
Yeah, it's funny how you mentioned, Kate, how you said like how audiences think they're part of the act. To some degree, they are. Like if you think about like orchestras and stuff, they play to a silent audience. Whereas when you're doing comedy, it's imperative that the
Good
audience
point, yeah.
reacts
Laugh,
to you.
yeah.
So I think they are. So actually, I think it's actually important to sort of respect them, even if they're hecklers and they're loud and they're garish. But I think that's one of the tough things. I think that's why it's so difficult to try and win them over, because they are part of it.
Yeah, that's true. And so I probably said it in slightly the wrong way, because I think and there's a difference, isn't there, between when they're engaging with you and they're trying to join in, and that's one set of maybe when they're just chatting loudly next to the stage, which is actually
I mean,
the opposite of what they said.
the gig that we were all talking about was about 20 people. It was like an L-shaped space that you had, and on one of the arms of the L, there was about 20 people stood up and talking to each other, getting progressively louder over the thing.
Actually homophobic audience members.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
a couple.
Yeah, that wasn't great. One of the things that I noticed about last night as well, and this is not to contradict what you've just said at all. I think one of the things is when you've got lights on you and you've got people in rows sitting in front of you, it's very natural to want to, because we all do it, to talk to that audience. And I think one of the things that maybe didn't help is because the way it was angled, we weren't addressing I did it a lot, and I realised every time you didn't, that's when they go. Because maybe they felt left out. I mean, for God's sake, I wonder what that feels like.
Couldn't imagine.
I think that's a really good point. There is that thing of trying to take the orchestra analogy actually a different way, that you are kind of like maybe trying to play them like an orchestra. You are the conductor, aren't you, to get the responses that you need, and that's why.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
a
the
dialogue,
skill
isn't it?
involved
exactly.
in that.
And also, I think I would say, and we've had many gigs like it, and it's all good stuff, because I think there were so many lessons to be taken away with some of these gigs last night. And one of the things that I learned last night was that if someone is being a good sport, maybe in the front row, I can then that's then for tonight. I'm going to speak to them, and they were very much on the left side of the audience. And of course, then I started to turn my back to that side, who were 8 pints deep, who were up for a laugh as well. They were loving it as well. But then, of course, it got to a point where we were like, we've lost them. Okay.
I mean, by the time I went on last, they just weren't even sat down at that point.
No.
That's tough.
Yeah, no, they were up, they were drinking. They were.
Yeah.
tough.
Well, they were holding each other up because they were paralytic. So that
drunk.
was tricky.
Yeah,
It was tricky.
It reminds me of I wasn't there. It sounds similar to like in the beginning of days. When you do like open mic gigs and it's literally just a microphone in the corner of a pub, and like the people who are there don't care about comedy at all.
Yeah.
They're just there to talk to their mates, and you're trying to like win over this crowd. So having people standing up and chatting to themselves.
Given the
is not-
choice, I'd always rather do comedy for people that want to see comedy, as opposed to enforcing
What a
comedy on
luxury.
them.
What a luxury.
It should be consensual.
I think some crowds,
If possible.
some crowds, it depends. Does anyone have a crowd? Like, I have done gigs where like it's a paid spot, the crowd have paid to be there. But this particular gig, I was doing queer jokes. I was doing a lot of the political stuff, and they were not feeling it, but in the opposite way. They weren't rowdy. They were just not reacting.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I literally at one point was like, oh, you are not feeling this. There was a stage with stairs. I walked down the stairs into the crowd, into the audience to crowd work. I was like, hey, Han, how you doing? They were looking at the floor, like the opposite end of the spectrum, where they were like, ooh. Like one of them just went, ooh, F slur, and then looked at the floor. And I was like, has anyone had any audience like that where they're actually not even giving you, like, at least with rowdiness, you can kind of play with it.
Yeah,
you
that's
can
true.
lean
Yeah.
into the chaos.
I've got feelings about comedians telling the audience that they're not into it or that they're quiet. It's an easy thing to do. I've been running a night for a couple of years, and it's the way it's laid out is it's tables, and people also order food, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not giving maybe like a theatre vibe to this sometimes. It is what it is, the way the venue wants it. So you get like a polite murmur sometimes from people who are killing it, and we get amazing acts coming to do it. But then there's this natural thing to say like, oh my God, what a crap audience or whatever. And you just sit back like, this isn't the way forward. Like if anything, we've put ourselves in this position, right? Sometimes we've got to flex these muscles a little bit just to try and do what we can without looking desperate. And sometimes we're going to have a night where we tried our best, and do you know what? It hasn't worked. In terms of, I am not going to look like I am begging for the validation of this audience, because do you know what? Bunch of arseholes. I deserve better than to beg. And I do it sometimes. You've probably seen me beg, you know what I mean? And
I have, but not in public.
but it's that bit, and I think you will. Status is so important to me anyway, because I have to. Some people don't need it on stage, but for me, I need it to be able to relax on stage. I need high status on stage to be able to feel like I'm owning the place.
Yeah.
And if I feel like I've begged, I've given that away. And I find it so hard to recover.
There's something relaxing though in knowing that, like, even if you're approaching a crowd that are just so turned off to anything that's remotely queer, at the end of the day, especially if it's a gig where they're not really there for comedy, they're there to drink pints and serve food, and there's like a waitress going, "Is that medium rare?" like over the punchline. There's something quite comforting and almost like giving confidence in knowing that, like, they're not looking to like follow you and come like online and come to gigs afterwards. And if anything, that probably makes it quite freeing, and you can like step into the confidence of knowing, well, they're not really going to be, they're not into comedy. They're not looking for gigs afterwards. Yeah. They're not going to become my fan base. And so let's just kind of like enjoy
they're not subscribing to your
Exactly.
Patreon.
They're not subscribing to my OnlyFans. No. But they're not going to be. So if anything, that almost, I feel like, can give you some confidence, because you're like, let's just play with what I've got. Let's do it.
I was going to say, I think if
Young people.
You can tell from the skin and the lack of hair.
I was going to say, if you say, in my opinion, if you say, "Oh, this crap," or like, where's the energy, guys? Like, you've immediately kind of fucked yourself over.
Yeah, I agree.
Big time.
You've broken
because like you're showing them like, oh, not like I'm afraid of you, but your lack of energy is pissing me off, right? And that immediately you don't want it to seem like anything about this gig is necessarily bothering you personally.
Yeah.
You want it to seem like this is something I do. This isn't bothering me. I just do this. I go on stage and then I go home. But by saying that, you're showing people that like deep inside something about this is bothering me. Yeah, and you don't want to. Even if inside bombing is killing you, you don't want to show these people that their reaction is having any effect on you at all, because then I feel like they're just going to be like, well, you're acting like you're like desperate.
I've been back at school.
Also, audiences are different. They have their own like vibe, and sometimes they can be a quieter audience. I went and saw a really well-known professional stand-up comedian who is on the TV all the time, and I went and saw her show at the Soho Theatre, and it was great, and it was a random Wednesday night, and we were a really quiet audience, really quiet. And she kept addressing it, and the more she addressed the more uncomfortable it made us feel.
Right.
To the point that, like, I laughed. Like, she said something really funny. I was in the right at the front. I laughed and I covered my mouth and she went, "Oh yes, just what every comedian loves: someone who covers their mouth when they laugh." And I just felt so like, right. And I was just like, that is how I laughed. I cover my mouth quite often just in everyday life.
Yeah.
It was nothing to do with me. Like, I didn't stifle my laugh. I laughed out loud, but
You don't want someone hyper-analysing your reaction to their jokes.
Exactly.
Be listening to the rest of her act, aren't you?
Exactly.
Oh my God, how do I laugh?
It was exactly that. And then I love her, and I've been so desperate to see her. And interestingly, I brought along somebody who could have taken or left her.
Yeah.
And then I was sat there like feeling really awkward. And there was this weird tension in the room where everybody was like, we're enjoying it because we clearly know who you are and we like it, but you've told us off because we're not performing in the way that you want us to.
Yeah.
And I get it. I would love like a really like loud, rowdy audience, but it
Yeah.
just like it was a Wednesday evening at
Exactly.
9:30
You're
in the evening.
tired.
Yeah.
You've been
Yeah.
at work all day.
Yeah.
You've still got 2 days of work
And
left.
we loved it. We were
Yeah.
enjoying it.
Yeah.
But it just wasn't at the level that she wanted it to be in because she kept addressing it. And it was a really interesting lesson for me because as an audience, how it made me
Yeah.
feel.
It makes me cringe if I've seen other people do it.
Yeah. One of the things I think I struggle with as well, sometimes you can have a great audience, but then the guys, no offense, working in the venue
Oh, yeah.
are kind of zapping the energy out by, I don't know, collecting glasses during
Yeah.
an act.
Yeah.
Or one of the venues I've done stuff in a lot is the kitchen is right next to
Oh, my
the
God.
door.
Yeah.
Oh,
And there's a serving hatch,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh,
There's a
could
gig-
you just not serve food
Right in the middle of it.
Take
Yeah.
a
Drinks
punchline.
I was
order.
just going to say, there's a gig in London that we probably all know, which is a great night in this really great room, but the pass
God.
is like in the room,
Oh.
and you can just guarantee if you are about to deliver a punchline, that ding of that bell for food is going off just as you do it,
Yeah.
and completely ruining the moment. I think it's a really good place to do it actually because it teaches you. There's so much going on because they're
Yeah.
collecting food. It teaches you a lot. But yes, it is like a really
Adaptability.
tough.
Actually, that's one of their like silver linings I try and take away from like really bad gigs. It's just like if I'm able to go to a gig that's very, very noisy, maybe one of those ones where it's a microphone in the corner of a pub, maybe where a cocktail shaker keeps going off,
Yes.
and I still manage to win people over, that's when I'm like, those jokes
Yeah.
are gold. I know that is good quality stuff. So
But also, does
If it
anybody
can
else
work
think?
better.
Does anybody else think that you kind of get to the point where, like, I care a lot less if it bombs because I believe in what I'm doing. Like, I believe in my
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, I find like especially over the summer I was at Edinburgh Fringe and I spent the month there, and obviously you have like such a varying type of audience. Like some nights it's really, really good, and then some nights you have like either barely anyone or just people who are like drunk and looking for a show to go to,
Yeah.
or I don't know, mad in general. So like some nights you like kill it, and you're like, and you leave those gigs and you're like, oh shit,
Because also there's an element where they're seeing a lot of shows. Seeing a show is much less of a
Yes.
special thing.
Yeah.
and
isn't
like
it?
the fact they are laughing at your jokes, you're like,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sick, I'm amazing, right? And then you have a bad night and you're like, oh, that really sucks. But because you're doing it so often, you don't have time to like decompartmentalize and sit there and be like, I'm a terrible, terrible comedian, like, because it's so quick and it's so fast paced. So I think like I kind of completely lost it, like the element of caring.
Yeah.
Like I obviously care about what I'm putting out and the
But it's different when it's work that you
Quality.
know is good.
yeah. And like, obviously I care about the quality and the quality of performance or whatever, but the actual how it went, I kind of lost it and was just like, I've done this like 30 times. Like,
Wow, what a dream.
You know,
I want to get there.
Yeah.
guys, just follow my lead.
We will.
Casually
We
get to
will.
Edinburgh. That's all we need to do.
And that-
Find an hour special.
And that, I think, as something as you work really hard to get there, and one of the luxury. When I'm sure when we all started out, you take it in any gig because you're like, I need to get out there and stuff. And now, sort of retrospectively, it's like I'm going to avoid that one because I don't have a good time. And what's
Yeah.
you know, I'm
Yeah.
You were talking about that the other day, weren't you? Like
Yeah.
avoiding certain,
Yeah.
doing ones that mean more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And avoiding
absolutely.
certain nights, maybe. Like I personally try and avoid gigs on a Sunday because I just don't think Sunday
Feels
Sunday
the wrong
crowds.
time.
Yeah,
No, it's true.
fair enough. I wouldn't see comedy on a Sunday. I've got work tomorrow and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And I think it's whether you it's something I guess I've been wrestling with is I can choose the gigs obviously that I want to do, and I can just go and play in spaces which I know are going to be nice and warm and supportive, and that feels lovely. And a bit where maybe I shouldn't be honest about it, but I am where I'm struggling now. And I need to force myself to go to places where I think it is going to be more challenging and more difficult for me, because I think I need to. It's a muscle. I don't know. It's something. It's testing. It's you have to do the fit in the gym. You have to do the exercise that you don't want to do, don't you?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think it's that. And I'm to be honest, having a bit of a crisis of confidence about it at the moment. And I think I need to go and do that. And I think that will get me stronger. So
I was going to say there's a danger in complacency when you kind of sit there and you know these gigs you're going to like kill at because you've killed at them before, and you're like, I love this room, I love the people it brings in, I know I'm going to do well. But then you start to think you're really, really good. And then you might gig somewhere else and you don't do as well. And it's like you need the mixture of those two things to kind of fully develop yourself as a comedian.
Yeah.
So you know your weak spots and good spots.
One thing I appreciate about the Welsh circuit, and I don't know if it's similar to London, obviously you guys can sort of like enlighten me on that, is that even though obviously people want to come to London and they want to go to like Bristol and Manchester and all these big, well-connected circuits, one thing I appreciated about Wales when you start out, and again, wondering if the London circuit's similar to this, is when you start out, you can go from doing like a low-key gentrified like art centre in central Cardiff to like a rugby club to a Welsh language gig to like a pub where they're serving food. You can kind of do a bit of like everything. Like everything is sort of all centered in those cities, and you do almost every gig very differently, and every crowd is completely different. Whereas you go to like some other cities where so many of the gigs are a bit more centered around people want to watch comedy, and you get quite similar audiences. I don't know. What's the London circuit like?
I might be completely wrong, but I feel like it does. There will be, doing the London stuff, is there's going to be room set up for open mic nights as well. And as you sort of grow out your comedy, that's when you sort of move out of London, where you do more things that are perhaps more, not corporate, but like you do things that are set up like events maybe, or you do things where there's going to be people, bigger numbers as well. Because, just talking about actual physical room, London's quite small in terms of the venue. So then actually they're very intimate, and then you start to go to, places outside of Zone 4 where you've actually got bigger rooms all of a sudden, and you're like, oh my gosh, like the Tube goes here?
I have seen parts of London I never knew existed.
I think we all did the other day.
At this point, comedy is a staycation. That's what the comedy is.
Right, we've got to bring this to a close now. So, Ben, where can we find you online, and have you got anything specific you want to promote?
No, but you can find me on Instagram at Ben_Pollard99.
You can find me at Merry M Comedy on Instagram and TikTok. That's Merry, MERRY.
My name is Jeremy.pop on Instagram, and you can also give the Comedy Cliff a follow as well for open night nights.
I am just basically at the Bimbo Babber on all socials.
Do you want to spell that?
THE, because, the is really tricky. Bimbo, BIMBO, and Babber is BABBER. It is a Bristol slang term.
My Insta and Twitter is lilyweb__. And me and my brother are making a coming of age web series sitcom.
Oh, I saw that.
If anybody wants to watch that, it's called Sorry We Arrived Early. It will be hopefully coming out at some point early next year.
Cool. On Instagram.
It would be. We'll be releasing it on YouTube. So we have like an Instagram account, and it's called @SorryWeArrivedEarly series. It's a play on the fact that we were premature. And it's like a coming of age, like kind of like acid induced crazy sitcom.
Amazing.
Sounds great.
I'm on Insta at KTS Dale.
I'm on Insta at Mr. David Ian, and you can check out davidian.co.uk for live dates for my solo show, Mediocre Gay. You can go to queercomedyclub.co.uk to find out details of all of our gigs. We do 2 gigs a month at John the Unicorn for our New Act, New Material night. We do our pro night once a month at Zodiac on a Saturday night. You can catch various different members of the people that you've seen here at all of our different nights. We do another podcast called Mediocre Gay, the podcast as well. So check that out and follow the Queer Comedy Club on Instagram.
And if you're a queer comedian who wants to come and get involved, then please do sign up for our New Acts and New Materials night.
And we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Queer Comedy Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at The Queer Comedy Club. Check out upcoming gigs on queercomedyclub.co.uk. And don't forget to rate and review us to help others enjoy this podcast too.